when we're talking about fiction, as you know, when you read a wonderful book, what is most engaging is really the voice of the character, the inner thoughts, the introspection. So it's the voice of the author that takes you into the story. In fact, there are great works of fiction where very little happens. Of course, now just to be, the usual cliche is that, James Joyce, wrote the story of a one day in the life of a simple man and created one of the greatest masterpieces. That book definitely is impossible about their own work, and they don't like to see somebody butchering their work. So I think it's wise and safe for an author to let other people work on their material and use their point of view. And so I've been the butcher many times in other people's work, because I also think that when you write a script from a book, you have to be able to betray it. You have to have that freedom, because it is impossible to translate a book and take it and put it like, delete and paste into a script. Even the dialogues that may be absolutely brilliant in a book, 9 times out of 10 do not work if taken and put into the characters. They seem, because when we write fiction, we are able to write dialogues that sounds natural, but it's actually always a bit literary, whereas the dialogue films need to be colloquial, broken, and hesitant. So even the dialogue that works in fiction does not apply in movies. So it really means to have 2 brains in order to work. And I think that the best kind of adaptations is that the brain that writes the film will end up with material that seems almost identical to the book. But if you put the 2 things together, you will look, and you can sometimes, if you're able to get hold of a script and compare it to the book, see that they are completely different. And when I say betray, I've also been able to sometimes change, change the ending, because sometimes you have to close. Actually, I don't know if I completely agree with you. I think that sometimes in films you cannot leave the audience hanging. I mean, I was thinking about what you were saying. I actually feel that you also in films, you can't really betray completely the audience. You really need them to go home and know what happened after the credits. But that's me. That's my personal opinion. Anyway, so it is technically, I think, a completely different type of work and mind. And the last thing that I want to say is that, of course, for me, to be able to write both is a real, very good balance in my life, because also, as you know, writing fiction means it's a completely solitary work. You're completely in control of it, but at the same time, you're alone. And in fact, writing films, I always write with other people. So I'm always in a room with at least 2 more people. We're together and we're bouncing ideas, and it's such a collaborative work. It's not so personal. And I think that the balance between one and the other, I don't think I could do without, because sometimes I really long for that intimacy of writing fiction on my own, with my own voice. And at the same time, I also need to be less personal and to work on something that is not as close to me as the fiction, but that it's still something that comes from me, but it's also a team work. As the cinema is until it's completed, because nobody, when you see the final credits, really all those people and those names that you see at the end really had a big part in it. And I think that that's a wonderful thing working in films, that you really have to, you're like a big circus making one big show, and it belongs to all of us.
Thank you. Just to make a point about the ending part, there are films where the journey is interesting and so is the destination. And then there are some films largely in world cinema. You won't get these kind of films in mainstream, whether it's Bollywood, Hollywood, or any part of the world, where the journey is far more fascinating than the destination. So that's when you can just cut it off there and leave the audience at it. We have Mr. Arun Khopkar with us, who is a documentary filmmaker.
I'm a filmmaker.
Alright, sorry. Who is a filmmaker and has also written a book on Gullat. So, cinema borrows a lot from literature. Is there something that literature can take from cinema? The other way around.
Actually, there have been many writers, particularly the bestseller variety, who do a lot of subject research and then cram their works with details, and with visual details and audio details, etc. And personally, I think that these are the writers who are least important for cinema. Because as one says that you can't jump over your own shadow. So these writers are trying to do what cinema can do better, but they do it much worse. So it is in fact people who are most literary and who bring out a different notion of maybe time, space, word, etc. Those are who are most productive for cinema. And Francesca just mentioned, I'll just give you an example because this happens to be from my particular field of specialization, the work of Sergei Mikhailovich Eisenstein. When I was working in Moscow, I was working out of Eisenstein's home, and there was a copy of Ulysses, which Eisenstein was presented by Joyce when Joyce was practically blind. Sorry for one interruption. I'm aware that this is a post-lunch session and the food here is incredibly good. So if there are some ascending nods, I'm an old hand at seminars. I can detect them, and then that dumps your confidence a little. So if the lunch is having a very positive effect on you, I suggest it's better you retire to your rooms, and if you want to stay awake, then yeah. So to come back to this copy of Ulysses, which Joyce had dedicated to Eisenstein, practically when Joyce was practically blind, has this very large lettering in Joyce's handwriting, and then this copy was so heavily annotated because Eisenstein was thinking of a film based on Karl Marx's Das Kapital, and he wanted to give that film the following credits: story by Karl Marx, scenario by James Joyce, and direction by Sergei Mikhailovich Eisenstein. And there are any number of large notes of why he wanted to give Joyce the scriptwriter's credit. Because Eisenstein was thinking of making this film as a form of inner monologue. It was one day in the life of a worker, and through associations, he goes back to the history of capitalism, then the exploitation, the labor, the early. It was supposed to be, Eisenstein was fascinated by people who seemed least literary. Like he was inspired a lot by Rilke's work. And he discusses how Rilke and Rodin, they build up images. Like instead of telling you that something, instead of giving you the word snow, Rilke will give you a sensation of looking at crystals and rainbows reflected in crystals. Then he will talk about the temperature of the coldness, and he will not name snow, but create an experience of snow. Now, as a filmmaker, it is very important that you create an experience and you don't describe. So it is extremely important. So that's why I feel that those writers who are cinematically who were supposed to write cinematically they're really third-rate imitators of cinema. Whereas people like Marguerite Duras, Bernano, I mean, they have inspired films of Robert Bresson, Bernano in particular. And then Marguerite Duras has made wonderful films. So these are people who have contributed to the language of cinema. So, and the other thing that one of the greatest contributors to our understanding of color is the German poet Goethe. And he studied the phenomena of color for something like about 45 years, and the book is called Farbenlehre, that means teaching of color or color theory. And even Beethoven considered that it was the most important book of Goethe. And so what do we learn from poets like that? That just as there is dramaturgy, there is chromaturgy. So when you start developing your film script, you're also thinking of what is happening in the background. Or if you're describing, say, Laburnum, and then you bring the characters back to the same scene when there is a change of season and all the yellow has disappeared. And then just completely change the frame of reference. So a lot of great writers, I mean, for example, Emile Zola is also master. There is a novel of his called Au Bonheur des Dames, the joy of, for the pleasure of ladies, and in which he describes a shop where fabrics are sold. And that whole passage is just about fabrics of white color, but with different thickness, different textures, and he ends it up, how the carpet is white, the flannel carpet is white, and from there he goes up and up and up and up, and goes through satins and silks, and finally the source of light, which is hidden by a thin muslin, white muslin. And that description of white is so phenomenal. And the other writer is, for example, Melville in Moby Dick. You have white as a color of purity. You have white as the color of innocence. But Moby Dick, Melville has turned white into a color of evil, because the whale is white and snow can be death. So it all depends upon what you want to learn from literature. And I think things like figures of speech, so to have a part for the whole, a lot of that, or puns, visual puns, like you have an object which you know should be yellow, and then you change its color, so obviously you are creating some kind of dissonance. So filmmakers who are familiar with literature, who are deeply interested in literature, have used things from literature, like their understanding of sensations and how to build. There is Abanindranath Tagore's autobiography, in which he is a child and he is lying on his bed and he is in the women's quarters and he is not allowed to go to the male section. So he's just listening to the sounds and he is imagining who are the people who are coming in the courtyard. This must be the milkman because his step is like this, then it must be the horse coming back, and then it must be so and so because he hears the anklets, so such and such servant. So now to have a scene like that in cinema will be fantastic, but this is not certainly written for cinema. So what you do is you learn to take from literature how images are built through sensations, and you try and find counterparts, and also in the way the images are structured, and that is what I feel.
Thank you. There were some very fascinating insights there on how cinema and literature can work together. But coming to Salim Saab, who's worked with theatre, who's worked with television, he worked with Shyam Babu on Bharati Coach, and who's also worked with cinema. So three different mediums.
Yeah.
How do these adaptations work? For example, Bharat Ek Coach,
Yeah.
that was also a book, finally, and you've done several adaptations on theatre. So what's the difference in adapting for these three different mediums?
You see, the great thing about theatre is that you depend entirely on the imagination of the audience. I'll give you a very crude example. If I say that the moon is so bright, so beautiful, there's a cloud which is covering it, and I create an image. In the play, in the theatre, the audience would imagine it and it will work. But in film, I'll have to put a shot of the moon, which kind of correlates to what I'm trying to show. Maybe the dialogue may not be needed. I just, as Khopkar was saying, I think it's essentially taking the experience of a book or a piece of writing and translating it into cinema. The finest example I can talk about, which Khopkar was also mentioning earlier, is Throne of Blood, Kurosawa's adaptation of Macbeth. Now, things you associate with Shakespeare, the poetry, the language, none of that is there in that adaptation. It's very medieval Japanese, is culturally rooted in Japan, and he has built in, as we were discussing, has given a motive to the wife, Lady Macbeth, of being pregnant, and so the aspiration for the throne becomes relevant to her. Now, if you see that film, the marching of the Burnham Wood, the whole use of fog and smoke and this whole imagery of mist, it creates a different kind of language, which is poetic, which is cinematic, which is visual. And of course, camera can do certain things much better than, because you have the ability to. But again, literature would give you details which your camera can follow. For say, if you read the opening passage of, say, Farewell to Arms by Hemingway. Now the way the novel opens, it's a long shot, where you see the trucks passing and then you get into details. So there is a kind of structure there in terms of visualizing the whole scene for you. It's simpler to write that scene. But then, if a character is feeling something which you can't correlate visually, then you... It's like we say, when your images stop speaking, you need a dialogue. Otherwise, you don't need a dialogue in cinema. So, I think these are the key areas where we focus. But coming back to your Bharat Ek Coach thing, it was interesting because it was Discovery of India book of Nehru, virtually history of India from Nehru's point of view. But the good thing Mr. Benegal did was that he realized that it was a book written some 20-30 years ago, and there were researchers which kind of refuted certain notions about what it was in that book. So he gave a correlative contemporary vision of the same episode, so-and-so historian say, which was in the voice of Om Puri. So there was a narrator which was representing the director or the maker, reflecting on history of India, major portions and things like that. And of course, then Gulzar Sahib did, which I was involved, Premchand's adaptation for television. There also, there were issues. For instance, the villages we need to show are hardly there now. प्रेमचंद के जो गांव हैं वो अब आपको यूपी में बहुत इंटीरियर में अगर मिल जाए तो मिल जाए, वो पूरा लैंडस्केप नहीं है. But the essence or the basic idea of the story, say a story like Kafan, which is so interesting because that's one of the most cynical stories of Premchand, where he says, let the society take care of the body. We'll drink and be merry. Now to find a village and a visual correlative of that whole topography which is described becomes an issue, which was a major issue in Satyajit Ray's adaptation of Shatranj Ke Khiladi, for instance. The Lucknow which is described in one opening paragraph of the story is somewhere missing in the entire film. It's a short story, but I'm saying the essence which Premchand, जिस खुमारी, जिस नशे में डूबी हुई सोसाइटी का जिक्र प्रेमचंद्र करते हैं उसमें, वो पूरी फिल्म में क्रिएट करना ना, दैट इज द चैलेंज आई फील सिनेमा का, if you are taking a piece of fiction. And there have been certain successful examples also. Satyajit Ray, the same person, did some of the finest adaptations. Fateh Panchali, Charulata, the whole trilogy series. I think he's a real textbook when it comes to adapting literature for cinema. But in Shatranj Ke Khiladi, A, I think because of the language, B, because of the time which was spent, and it was not a rural, it was an urban-based story, so the structures and rest of the things would change. But at the same time, you have a Muzaffar Ali who makes a film like Umrao Jana Tha on the same period. It's so interesting that in those 3 years of Lucknow, 77, 78, 79, we had 3 films adapted from written work, which was Shatranj Ke Khiladi, Satyajit Ray, Ruskin Bond's The Story made as Junoon by Shamdanigal. Ismat Chugtai was involved in that. And you have Mirza Hadi Ruswa's Umrao Jan being made by Muzaffar Ali. And if you see those 3 films, you see the filmmaker and his attitude to telling the story. Umrao Jan is best remembered for the ghazals and the mujra and the musical of the recreation to nahi kehna chahiye, but it's something we take away from that film. Shyam Babu's story is a very detached look at that transitional phase of Indian history.
And skin tone correctly. So Subrato has given an exposure, used it throughout, and a technique of lighting through his trilogy, which is like you, Durga's skin tone is something that in the first shot establishes this Indian girl.
Yes.
From Bengal.
Yes.
No, you don't, she doesn't have to even open her mouth. And the trees, etc., the representation of the greenery in black and white was something that Subrato's supreme control over the exposure made possible. So sometimes these are not the factors that a non-filmmaker would see in a film. But you say, what an exposure. And there is a story that Subrato had told me that he made Charulata, and for Charulata they wanted this old Haveli, and Subrato's mother helped locate that Haveli. And then Bansi Chandragupta, he created that set, beautifully created, but it was Subrato's lighting that made you feel that the set has come alive.
Yes.
And after seeing the film, Subrato's mother was praising Bansida's work. So Subrato was a great one for sulking. I have not seen a man who is better at sulking than Subrato. His face could be longer by about 25%, and he would, stretch it even to 30% sometimes. And he started sulking, so the mother, he didn't talk to her for one day. So next day the mother said, "What's the matter?" He said, "Had it not been for my lighting, it wouldn't have looked like this."
No, but and that was the last of them together. Satyajit Ray and Subrato, that was the last film we did for him.
Yeah, we were speaking of adaptations. Most of the adaptations have happened in regional languages, not so much in mainstream films. There was a time when probably the Devdas, that period, the 40s, 50s, there were quite a few. Sahab Bibi Aur Ghulam was also adapted. 70s, 80s also there were quite a few adaptations from mainstream like Gulshan Nanda's Sharmili or Kati Pata Mere. Then it just kind of vanished. Now it's of course Chetan Bhagat.
But we are forgetting 2 classics, Ramayana and Mahabharata. So mainstream cinema has been all about,
is all about
recycling those.
As somebody once famously said that any Indian film or Hindi film can be boiled down to the Ramayana and Mahabharata.
And now I'll add 2 more films to that. One is Godfather. So whether they make Maqbool or they make Wasipur, it's a tribute to that and Mother India somewhere. So Ramayana, Mahabharata, Mother India and Godfather are the 4 works which kind of...
But why do you think, I would like to ask Mr. Khopkar as well as Salim Sahab here, why do you think the adaptations have dried up so much in the last 20-25 years. I mean, Chetan Bhagat's film being the biggest hit is a story in itself, and 3 Dates makes 300 crores. We had a film which won several Oscars, which was written by an Indian, with an Indian composing the music. The sound was by an Indian, but directed by Danny Boyle, Slumdog Millionaire, which very few people remember the original name of the book, because eventually it was sold as Slumdog Millionaire. It started off by being Q&A and then became Slumdog Millionaire. The adaptations, what Vishal Bharadwaj does is largely the Shakespeare adaptations.
Yeah.
The new one is
It's simpler actually. Shakespeare is simpler to adapt. It's like Ramayana and Mahabharata. You know the basic story, so you can take one.
But at the same time, there's a big risk involved where you know, if you go wrong, then people, it can backfire big time. The other one is Amish now, who's working with Karan Johar. But apart from that, in the last 20-25 years, he has sort of given up on adaptations. Parinita was one of the famous ones.
I have a feeling that this is a very personal observation, that post-independent cinema, immediate cinema, people like Shailendra, then Abbasa, Sahib Ludhianvi, many of them had come after the partition. And they were real bumps. And so there is a song like Chahe koi khush ho chahe galiya hazar de, अरे मस्त राम बन के जिंदगी के दिन गुजार दे. Yeah. And then he said, हाँ, खाए जा मजे, if the बनिया asked you for a payment, खाए जा मजे के साथ जब तलक उधार दे. So their scripts had something which was based on, you will find the character of the bum in many of those films. Even Avara is a classic story of. So there was something where they started creating. They had seen those films, but like people like Gurudutt, etc., were very, very well acquainted with what was happening in Hollywood. But they had their own things to say. Now, in the last 20-25 years, the filmmakers have become far more cynical. That I think, with the possible exception, a very good exception of Vishal Bharadwaj, in the mainstream, the kind of, if they want to show poverty, they want to show something, it's not the life that they know.
Exactly.
People like Mario Puzo, or people who wrote the noir films in the 30s and 40s, like Scarface, etc., they knew these criminals well. Al Capone was something that they had experienced. So, if you want to fake, then it is better to fake with the least effort. No? So you just take, you just steal, and in India you don't have to pay royalties. So there is one less person to pay. So producers love it.
Yeah.
And the audience also loves it because there is a well-made structure that is given. So it's a kind of intellectual dishonesty and paucity of the mainstream cinema. Because mainstream cinema, we had giants in the mainstream cinema, and the kind of Raj Saab, there is a story that Mangesh Desai had told me, that when he was mixing the film with Raj Kapoor, Mera Naam Joker, Raj Kapoor had 6 main characters, and he had developed the soundtrack for a particular density, and the difference to the spectator was minimal.
Yeah.
So, but he was spending 6 times the money. So Mangesh Saab asked him, Rajji, आप क्यों इतना खर्च कर रहे हैं? ऑडियंस में बच्चे रोते होंगे, माएँ उनको डांटती रहेंगी, वो आप क्यों इतना खर्च कर रहे हैं? So Raj Kapoor, and this is not Manikau, Raj Kapoor said that मैं दूसरों के लिए फिल्में थोड़ी ही बनाता हूँ, मैं तो अपने लिए बनाता हूँ. And this is not Manikau.
Yeah. No, I'll just
Could well have been.
I'll just add that what he was till 50s. You see, the major source of cinematic inspiration for all these guys were Bengali cinema, the new theatre, which had a kind of literary tradition behind, which kind of got diluted by the early 70s when the Punjabi proposal maker came into filmmaking, and he started making films around stars. So one of the major reasons has been like that, because I know for sure, तो गुलजार साहब फॉर इंस्टेंट मीट शरद चंद्र की 2 नॉवेल्स को उन्होंने अडैप्ट करके छोटे से लिए और उस पर फिल्म बनाई. बट सेंसिबिलिटीज का इशू एज यू वाज सेइंग कि ना तो वो जिंदगी देखी है, ना वो गांव देखा है, ना वो दुनिया देखी है. उनका लिटरेचर, इफ यू बिलीव मी, इज सिनेमा. आदित्य चोपड़ा का लिटरेचर सिनेमा है. उसका लिटरेचर ये रिटन वर्ड नहीं है. करण जौहर का रेफरेंस सिनेमा है. सो जिंदगी के किसी भी हिस्से के बारे में बात करेंगे तो उनके दिमाग में एक फिल्म होती है, उसका एक सीन होता है, and that is their reference. So we are already in a time when your films are becoming your source of literature. That's why so many remakes. If you want to remake Dawn, you want to remake XYZ films, you are wanting to remake because now that's the literature you have been born with. You have not read the originals. So
interestingly, in Hollywood, it's the other way around, where a book becomes popular and then
exactly. I was just saying that 80 to 85% of Hollywood cinema is based on published works.
Even if it's something like 50 Shades of Grey.
And that's why you have this adapted screenplay award in Oscars and original screenplays. These are two. And also coming to Vishal, because he is a close friend. In case of Vishal, because he has read, he's made a film on a Ruskin Bond short story. Blue Umbrella. He's exposed to literature and wanted to complete his trilogy. But his idea was that he wanted to discover Shakespeare in contemporary similarity with contemporary. Like he's from Meerut, so he could think of an adaptation like Omkara, which is Othello. In
something like
Kalyug was different, but I'm saying to based in Meerut ke gangster के milieu में Othello को देखना, that was because he has seen Meerut, he had seen Muslim culture, so he came with Maqbul, and of course Haider, because Haider also had, you see, when you talk about Vishal, please remember there is always another writer with him. So there is a Basharat Peer who gives him the material for his Haider, or there is Abbas Taiwala who comes in and works with him on those two characters. Plus शेक्सपियर के साथ एडवांटेज अगेन वही है, हम प्लेस में भी करते हैं, धूम से पकड़ लीजिए, कान से पकड़ लीजिए, सर से पकड़ लीजिए, लोग जानते हैं, वो अंधों का हाथी नहीं है. So it is a known story. So you know कि हम रामायण की एक कैटेगरी को फोरग्राउंड में रख के हमने कहानी बनाई है, हमने लक्ष्मण के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से रामायण बनाई है, हमने भरत के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से बनाई है, या हमने इनके पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से, दुर्योधन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से हम महाभारत को देख रहे हैं, अभी अश्वत्थामा के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से देख रहे हैं, बिकॉज वो हमारी कॉन्शियसनेस का हिस्सा है. Which is I was saying, तो हिंदी सिनेमा में वो बहुत बड़ी एडवांटेज है.
I think cinema is something that at least we on the stage can talk on and on. But about 3 minutes back, I was told that 5 minutes are left. So there are 2 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions, we have just 2 minutes. Anybody? Any questions?
Francesca, you work with literature of your own and you work with screenplays. Do you prefer working on, or not prefer, what's the kind of feeling when you work on someone else's work versus something that you're doing originally?
Actually, I just wanted to make a point there. When you said that you'd rather have somebody else work on your book, would it not be better if you yourself butcher your film rather than giving to somebody else? No?
I'm actually a believer in democracy, so if I butcher and I want the author to stay away, I think it's their right to do the same with me. Okay, quickly. I feel my work as a film writer is the work of a tailor. I'm working for a director. Directors are different. I've worked with female directors, men, young, older. Some are comedians, some are very serious authors. And so for me, every time I write a script, I know what I need to keep in mind is that I have to write something that he or she will be able to do, will speak to him or her, it will be his or her voice. In other words, I try to fit, as a tailor, the jacket. So, and this is, because I've decided I want to be a writer, I'm not a director. And so in a way, I don't feel it's a kind of, it's a matter of being humble, because that has nothing to do with it. But you're preparing a script, a canvas that person will be able to then produce and put on stage. So I like that, but of course, on the other hand, I have that total freedom that writing fiction gives me. And as I was saying earlier, it is quite wonderful to be able to fill the white page and be totally free. On the other hand, what I miss when I do that is that kind of feedback that the team gives you, because not only you're working with other writers, but of course you're also, because you're writing a product, ultimately, you also have to talk to producers who have budget problems, so there is, a lot of compromise. And so I think that alternating between the two is quite a good education.
I guess on that note, we should call it quits. Thank you very much, Salim Sir, Francesca ji, and Khopkar sir. I hope you all enjoyed the session. We have the next session coming up soon. Thank you very much.